Hi, today I thought we might have a little chat about weeds. What exactly are weeds? What makes a plant a weed as opposed to a flower? What's the difference? Our gardens are full of different plants. Some of them are native, some of them are non-native, some of them we grow deliberately and spend ages cultivating, and others pop up of their own accord. Which ones should we think of as weeds, and which ones are welcome wildflowers? Why do we spend so long, so many countless hours weeding to get rid of certain plants, and hours and hours and hours encouraging other plants? What is it about the ones we like and the ones we don't like? So let's have a few examples. This rather beautiful flower is betony. It's a native wildflower, mint family, really popular with long-tongued bumblebees. And a beautiful flower, but it's a native wildflower. Is it a weed? Well, I'd be hard pushed to call this a weed, but what's the difference between this and teasel or thistles or ragwort or any other plant? They're just all wildflowers at the end of the day. Some people might consider this a weed. Teasel. I think it's gorgeous. It's a glorious plant. It's enormous. These self-seeded in my flower bed and I left them. It's a native flower, of course. Does readily self-seed, but who wouldn't want these magnificent plants growing in their garden? It's about 8 feet tall, this one. And there's lots of bumblebees on it, occasionally butterflies. And also the seeds are really popular with finches, things like goldfinches, in the autumn and winter. And it's one of those kind of interesting plants that looks pretty even when it's not flowering. Just this kind of striking structural inflorescence is amazing. Hogweed. It's a very common native wildflower. Quite a lot in my garden. It's a bit thuggish, but it's beautiful. Attracts lots of insects, particularly again soldier beetles. They seem to pop up everywhere at this time of year, but also a lot of others too. Not so many right at this second, but you get a range of insects, particularly short-tongued pollinators like hogweed. It's related to carrot and parsnip. They're very similar flowers, in fact. This is creeping thistle, one of 3 or 4 thistle species I've got in my garden. This is probably the most thuggish. It spreads by underground rhizomes and pops up over and over again. So it can take over. I wouldn't plant it in your garden unless you've got a corner that it can't escape from very easily. But it's really popular with insects, and this one in front of me, there's quite a few honeybees. I just saw a nomad cuckoo bee on here a second ago. You often get butterflies on creeping thistle. Quite an attractive little flower as well. But yeah, it definitely falls on the weed end of the spectrum. This, of course, is ragwort, widely regarded as a noxious weed, and often persecuted. We're told we shouldn't allow any to grow even in our gardens because it's terrible stuff. It kills horses, and there have been some wild claims that it kills thousands of horses a year. Of course, it is poisonous, but those claims are wildly exaggerated. As far as I can tell, it kills a very, very small number of horses a year, 1 or 2 perhaps, and only if it's cut, dried and made into hay. Then horses will eat it, and if the hay has a high component of ragwort, it can kill them. But you're an absolute fool if you make hay from ragwort. Growing in the wild or in a garden or wherever, animals, mammals won't eat it. Horses know full well not to eat this stuff and don't touch it. So it can grow happily in a pasture without posing any threat to livestock at all. And it's a native flower, it's beautiful, and it's food to a lot of insects, of course famously cinnabar moths, the yellow and black stripy caterpillars. Very common in my garden. There's none on this plant, but I'll show you some in a bit. And lots and lots of nectar feeding insects. Love ragwort. You get butterflies. It's various. There's hoverflies on here at the moment. There's a few solitary bees. There's a pair of the inevitable mating soldier beetles. They spend their whole life mating. It's absolutely alive with insect activity. So I grow it in my garden and I'm proud of it. And I think we should be much more tolerant of our beautiful native wildflowers. Look at all these cinnabar moth larvae on here. There's hundreds of them. Brightly coloured to warn that they're poisonous. They accumulate the poisons from the ragwort itself in their bodies. And so they're toxic to predatory birds. Those are soldier beetles buzzing around. One nearly landed on the lens. Lots of them here. So what then is a weed? There's no right answer to that. It's whatever you decide it is. One man's weed is another man's wildflower, or woman's. So for example, a poppy or poppies growing in a cereal field, the farmer would probably consider them a weed. That's not what he's trying to grow, and it wouldn't be helping his crop. But if a poppy were to spring up in your garden, you might think, well, that's very beautiful, that's a wildflower. Or you might spend ages cultivating poppies to grow in your garden. It just kind of depends on your point of view. Or put it another way, you can get rid of all the weeds in your garden just like that by just calling them all wildflowers. Or at the very least, we should all learn to be a little bit more tolerant of our native wildflowers, many of which have a really important ecological role supporting insect life. Thank you. If you'd like to know more about bumblebees and other pollinators and the wonderful world of insects in general, or about how to make your garden more wildlife friendly, then you might enjoy one of my books, available at all the usual places. Thank you.